A golden period of Ferrari race history started in 1956 with the famous 250 GT long wheelbase Berlinetta. This was a competition car that consistently won international races, yet could be driven on the street, or as many competitors chose to do, driven to the track and raced. Preceded by 8 competition cars, with bodies by Pininfarina and others, these cars were Enzo Ferrari's first production cars. This series of 71 cars, designated Tour de France's, were named in honor of the Marquis de Portiga's victory in the 1956 Tour de France race. These cars are usually referred to by one of the most distinguishing characteristics of the different body styles, the number of louvers that grace the rear sail panel. The rarest are the 14 louver cars, of which 9 were built, the first being completed in late 1956. The car pictured here is serial number 0703. The 24th running of the Mille Miglia was to be the last running of one of the great races over public roads. The Mille Miglia was a 1,000-mile race over the 2-lane Italian roads between Brescia in the north and Rome in central Italy. Albino Buttici, an amateur Italian driver, entered his 14-louver Tour de France, serial number 0703, in this epic race. He was one of 22 Ferrari entries that year, including a team of 5 factory-sponsored cars. And, like the factory team cars, he probably drove it over the 80 miles of public roads from the factory in Modena to Brescia for the start of the race just 4 days after its May 8, 1957 completion date. Carrying the number 430, designating its starting time, he left the ramp at Brescia for the grueling 10 hours of flat-out racing. In just a little over 10 hours, the leading Ferraris would traverse the ancient city of Rome before turning north and making the winding, twisting assault on the mountainous backbone of Italy, up through the treacherous Futa Pass to Bologna, where rain made the roads dangerously slick, and then through the long, straight stretches of Italy's breadbasket before returning to Brescia. Buttici would accomplish an amazing feat. He and serial number 0703 would be the 9th overall and the 4th in the GT class, the highest placing by an amateur Ferrari driver. He would do this alone, without factory support, or a knowledgeable navigator. After possibly being crashed in the 1957 Tour de France race, serial number 0703 was rebodied. The writer Jess Perot, in his fantastic book Ferrari GT, The Competition Cars, says the body was updated in the 50s with covered lights like the second series 3-louver TdFs. Also updated with the later nose was its sister car 0707. As an expert in the English Club publication in 1975 wrote, the cars were returned to Scagletti for updating. Since Scagletti was making the later body for Ferrari and had the body molds for the panels, such modifications would be as simple for them as changing plugs would be for us. Imported to the U.S. sometime in the late 1960s, it was in the large Norm Silver collection for a decade, and since purchased by its current owner, it has been vintage raced since the early 1980s, carrying the Buttici Mille Miglia number 430. From 1982, it has never failed to finish a race, thus demonstrating the magnificent reliability and performance built into the 250 Gran Turismo competition cars. It had been 10 years since Ferrari was the honored mark at the largest and most prestigious vintage race in the United States, held annually near Monterey, California at the Laguna Seca track. Last raced in 1984 by its current owner of 20 years, 0703 made an impressive finish. As one writer said, "I personally saw the Tour de France give drivers of the other marques an exciting battle for first place."
since this is a Ferrari show this year, Ferraris have always been dual-purpose cars. Most of them were made to be dual-purpose cars, so owners could be racers. One of the guys that here this year, I don't know if he's here in this group, but he was here this year, proved that that was the case. In his car, I'm going to read this in spite of what Steve says. George Arntz in 1958, this is a quote. Since Luigi Canetti, since Luigi and I felt that the objective was to prove the car to be what we said it was, a true GT car, I made a point of driving it to and from every Eastern SCCA race for the 1958 season. A reward of 13 checkered flags for 13 starts. Our award goes to a guy who drives his car to this race and races it effectively. This year, it goes to a guy who drove his car here from Atlanta to race it and will drive it back to Atlanta. And this is not the first time he's done this. He thinks that that's the way sports cars are supposed to be used. And he's driven it to races all over the East. Is John Apin here? This is the spirit of what we do here.